Hi, and welcome to week four's focus video. This week we're going to be talking about progressive history and historians. Okay, let's jump right into the discussion questions. I'll take each one of them and then give them both to you and then break each one of them down. All right, so first question. The progressive school of historiography developed as the progressive movement itself took root in the United States in the late 19th century. However, the notion that history ought to be seen as the progress of human civilization is not limited to the United States. There are some foreign analogs. Based on your reading thus far in Arnold, Gaddis, Novick, Tosh, Truman, and Williams, identify three key characteristics of progressive history, and what do you think the strengths of this approach are and what weaknesses exist with the progressive school? Identify a progressive historian and provide evidence as to why you consider them a progressive historian. Your choices are limited to historians working between 1910 and 1950. Those are your two questions. All right, let's break this down a bit. For the first discussion question, you need to bear in mind there were both political progressives, Teddy Roosevelt, although he did write some history, Woodrow Wilson, although he was a political science, and others. See also Herbert Crawley, his work Progressive Democracy, Colonel Edward House, see his work Philip Drew Administrator, pretty scary to be honest, and there are progressive historians. Charles and Mary Beard, Carl Becker, Arthur M. Schlesinger Arthur M. Schlesinger Sr. are representative progressive historians. Political progressivism was, to an extent, the product of the marriage of the managerial revolution of the 1860s to 80s with an evolutionary Marxism. In Britain, a similar movement was known as the Fabian Socialists. Political and historical progressives shared a late 19th century development of the Enlightenment emphasis on reason and science that resulted in both a Darwinian emphasis on the evolution of humanity and human nature, and a theological shift away from the traditional tragic view of human nature toward a more optimistic view of human nature that resulted in liberal, quotation marks, theology and a shared view of the messianic nation, again in quotation marks, notion. Progressive historians were critical of the past, seeing history as the inevitable progress of the human race, often adopting a Marxist-like approach, while arguing that things also constantly improved, resulting in evolution rather than revolution. In terms of worldview, progressives generally saw human nature as good and getting better. It was the task of the progressives to lead humanity to a better world. Were generally materialists and quite often humanists, the subtle name for atheists at the time. There's a little kind of spectrum on the bottom or a listing on the bottom in teeny tiny print that goes through the pendulum motion of historical schools, from the nationalist school, what unifies us, to the progressive school, what separates us, to consensus, what unifies, to the new left, what separates, to the neo-consensus and neoconservative, what unifies. On to slide 2 of DQ1. As you consider the notion of the progressive school, one might consider that progress, in the sense both the political progressives and the progressive historians employ it, is not the iPhone 11 becoming the iPhone 13 or even technology itself. Rather, it is the progress of humanity and human civilization. They hypothesized an improvement in humanity itself, an evolving human nature that was improving, progressing. This view began to emerge in the Enlightenment by discarding tradition and superstition, embracing instead reason and science, and believing the very nature of humanity would change. Reflecting on the past 200 years, do you think that is the case? Your answer to that question will in large measure shape your response to the progressive historians and whether or not the progressive historians' underlying assumption was correct. They did add to our study of history. DQ2, identify a progressive historian and provide evidence as to why you consider them a progressive historian. Choices are limited to historians working between 1910 and 1950. Using your characteristics, strengths, and weaknesses from DQ1, analyze the career and works of a progressive historian, working from about 1910-ish until 1950-ish. You can use outside sources here for your work, though Novick looks at the progressive historians in some depth. And finally, this week there is also a library lesson and quiz. Take a look at the classroom under week 4 and you'll find it. Please watch the videos that provide useful tips in locating primary sources through the library, the web, and the archives at the end of the week. And then there is also a short little quiz to help you differentiate between primary and secondary sources. That's all there is, folks. Y'all take care, stay safe, and I'll see you around the campus. Bye-bye.